started.
Yep. Well, I guess I'll just get started then. Well, hello to everybody. I'm Oliver, and I'm just gonna show some of the Advent of Code stuff that I worked over on using Wing only. I will say I only got to day 5, and then life got in the way as usual with Advent of Code. But still fun to share and see what challenges I actually hit through the road, and how my workflow actually changed throughout using Wing throughout this. That was kind of also interesting. So yeah, let me share screen and let's do so you guys can actually read stuff here. All right. Great. So basically, for people that are not that familiar with Advent of Code, it's basically just some small programming challenges day by day. It's usually you get a text file that you have to pass. They usually look like, if we go to day 1, like this, just a bunch of text, and then you have to pass it, and you have to come up with get a result from that based on some description they have on what the challenge is. Not really gonna go into what the different challenges were every day because I don't think that's really that relevant for us. But it's relevant looking into like the flow and what you actually discover trying to do this. And it's a kind of common practice that a lot of people try to, with these Advent of Code, to use a language they're not that familiar with, or new languages, to see things they're actually missing in it, or things that annoy them, and so on, to figure out where to improve on them, because they often have a lot of things you need to pass, loop over, and so on. So yeah, here we have my solution for day 1, and one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to actually test things when doing it. Also at the bottom here I have a test, and this was before I actually realized there was an expect API already built in. So all of my tests at the start was using a search to do it all, which annoyed me. And then I wrote about it, then was told, oh yeah, you already have an expectation API instead. So in later versions, I'm actually using that instead for my test, but I didn't want to go back and clean up in the old ones because I find it funny to see the progress throughout that also. But yeah, basically the first day here was take every single line and then find the numbers in it. So here it says 1 and it says 5, and then you have to, and then you can find actually find things from that. So yeah, this is just all my tests to make sure that I'm finding the right numbers all the way through. And then, yeah, this is also something I've done in 200 different ways throughout all of this, but how I actually wanted to run this is a bit different. So I created an invite method that takes in a string, which is the whole input of the file, and then loop over it and run my other invite method up here that is actually doing the calculations. And then and then I'm just returning the results here. Also, something I realized much later, that when I have an integer I need to turn it into a string, I could do it in a much better way than JSON stringify it every single time. But yeah, and then I just have a simple onDeploy function here. So whenever that runs and reads this input file and give us and logs the results. So essentially, I guess it should work fine. So essentially, we can just wing it, and yeah, then we should have a running here. We have the test here that we can run, and we get some result here. We also see the result here. Of course, we see that every single time here because it's on an onDeploy method actually. So it will do it every single time.
What was the rationale of using it on deploy and not just calling them inflate method from the test, inflate closure from the test?
So I am in the test, I'm calling the in-flight method, but it was because I wanted a way to, my tests are just testing like simple lines and so on, but the on-flight, on-deploy here is taking the whole file instead. So this reading this file from storage here and then checking on that. So the tests were more like sanity check to make sure that I have every single line here correctly first. But using an undeploy was kind of just the first thought I thought of, oh, I just want to resolve immediately when I start the application. And it did prove some challenges, I think. When I did this at the start with undeploys, I think I hit some weird, at least I got some weird crashes throughout that, actually. At the start, I think they might not be there anymore, actually. But with reading the files in an undeploy and so on, I think it gave some, I had some weird results, at least throughout that, and changing things that didn't work as I expected. Can't exactly remember what I was experiencing there, but at least I got some weird crashes at the start from that. I think they had been resolved since, though. Yeah.
I think the other alternative would be to create like an in-flight class, which is something that so basically just an in-flight class in the constructor. You load the file, and then you have a method called calculate, and it uses the loaded file. You store it as a field, right? Like the classic, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is also something do something like that later on, which is kind of funny.
Okay.
So yeah, things I realized when doing this is like I had to do a bunch of for loops all around the code, and for me at least, I'm very used to using just chainable collections and stuff like that instead. So it was kind of annoying having to write a for loop again. I don't think I've written for loops in many years because I'm just used to using collections all the time. But I was kind of weird having to remember going through that again. And then I also realized that my plugin for IntelliJ was not that happy about all the syntaxes. So, for example, it's saying that this is an error, which is obviously not an error. That's just, when you see these errors, don't mind them. It's just the code I've written for the editor that is not completely perfect there. And I have not fixed all of those. Yeah, I guess we can go to day 2 here for the next challenge. Here I actually went with an in-flight class for some of the things. Let's go to day 2. So this one here, let's see. I went with in-flight classes and some properties and things. The constructor here, with a constructor here, which also made me realize that I wanted to create a feature that I've submitted and I'm still working on implementing that at some point, but essentially allowing us to define all of this in one line instead.
Yes, we saw.
A pull request I open, or issue I open for that. Yeah, so here I actually have multiple classes. I have one for handling what they call a cube set here, and for handling the whole game board. So I wanted to use classes a little more here. And yeah, here I do it differently. So I have a static method on the game instead that takes a line and can pass that. And let's see, where do we go? Having to remember all of this. Yeah, I still have just an in-flight method in here, which is the one where I can, to check if the game was valid. There's a lot of things happening here. We had to do multiple different things. Check, get the sum. So here I changed things to being cloud functions instead of on deploys. And one of the reasons is it's the little thing about AdventOfCode is AdventOfCode is always split in 2 parts. You have 2 tasks in those, and using an undeploy kind of also felt a little weird then in that for that, because I actually need 2 outputs in the end, one for part 1 and one for part 2. So of course I could have done 2 undeploys and just gave some logging that actually made sense. But here I still went with a log of the output, which I think in later days I actually changed to using returns instead, because then it's a little nicer to look at that when using the console. And we again have a test here. Here I was still using a search for all of them, but there's a little more testing involved this time. And this is for part 2 of them, and test for part 2. I didn't split anything out to multiple files when doing this, but I didn't bother doing that. But yeah, I then had all the tests here, which was kind of nice, and could be able to just run them while working on it. So this was essentially how I worked on it. Was a code-driven development way. So I wrote the test and just kept rerunning it and seeing how that worked out. And yeah, and then I could run my parts here and get some of that in the console here. This is where I realized later on, I should probably just return the results so I get it directly here instead of in the console.
In the log.
In the log down here. Just made more sense. Sorry. And I also realized while writing the test, I often did like logs inside of my test itself. And as far as I remember, there was something about the output looking not that great inside of the console in here, but when you had coloring on it. See if I can remember exactly what the issue was there. I think it was something when you had any logging happening inside of a test. So it could at least look a bit weird, I think. Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of forgetting the specific issue there, but there was something about it. You probably have found my notes. I wrote about all of this beforehand, but well. But yeah, it was this one I at least tried to explore a little more with the classes and in-flight classes, which definitely was interesting to see, trying that out to see what you can do with those. Well, guess we can. Yeah, so day 3 I was actually dealing with the regex stuff also, which was it was interesting, but it also proved some challenges for me because the regex only currently, I don't know if it's changed since then, but currently only has a match function. So you can only get the Boolean with results from a regex. You cannot actually get different parts out saying you want a specific part of the string, or actually get the different matches out of a regex also. And that was at least something that I hit multiple times, at least in AdventOfCode, especially because AdventOfCode is a lot about passing random strings like this. Then it's very nice being able to say, I just want this part here with a regex statement, but that was not possible. So that meant we had to do a lot of 4 if statements and 4 statements and 4 statements instead. And
yuck.
Yeah. It's.
Do we have a bug on this, by the way?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we. Okay, I guess it's not a bug. I guess it's more of a feature request to add in a new add support for actually being able to get matches also.
That match will actually work as it's expected to work.
Yeah, I guess the match it works as you somehow want. Like it gives you a true false, which is also something you sometimes want, but sometimes you want to actually get the actual matches also.
Yeah.
So it's just different sometimes, like knowing, okay, how does it actually work this time? Yeah, and let's see. Yeah, here I actually changed to using the expect API instead, which made the results a lot nicer for me to read when things didn't work. Yeah, I think that was one of the things I hit a lot. If I just go back to day 2 and make one of the tests fail here, let's just change this to 7 and go to the console. I think that was when the output looked very weird. Okay, that's yeah. Oh yeah, when you expect it as there's something at least. Okay, no, I'm forgetting. So, but yeah, day 3 I continued with still trying to do things the test-driven development way. And yeah, there's not much to go into the test here, but at least I used the expect equals and nil a lot, which which made it a lot nicer for me to writing all of these tests, and the output was much nicer. Very nice to figure out that this was built in. I also really started to enjoy more and more that you have this test or the test keyword directly in Wing, which is, I think, not something I've seen in any other languages really do in this way. It's normally whatever test framework is that you're using that defines how you want to do things. But it's kind of nice just having this out of the box, just being able to write your tests so simple. It did, however, prove a little annoying when starting to actually wanted to run the test via the Wing test command, because what I did was I had all of my tests in the main file, so I was just expecting like I can do Wing it, and then I'm starting the console on the main file. So at the start I was expecting that I just could do Wing test and it would run my tests in the main file, but obviously it's expecting that you actually give it some file here, so I would have to pass in the main file, which is not really an issue, but just one of those things I kept hitting, that I would run Wing test command and then it would fail, and then I would remember, oh, I have to pass in the main file into this, because then it might be a consideration if there's no other Wing files in the project or in that folder, that it should just take the main file by default when doing Wing test.
Yeah.
For consistency with Wing it. Yeah.
I agree. Is anyone taking notes, by the way? Because I'm hearing a lot of really awesome feedback.
I think I did create I think I did create a list for most of the days, and about the stuff we actually wanted, but I saw, and I can see there's people taking notes.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Let's see. So I think day 4 was there anything special about that? Yeah, I think this was the day where I actually used the math stuff also, because there was some more complicated stuff needed there. To that extent, I'd even have to start writing comments for small things like this. So yeah, I actually started using them, just some simple math ceilings, and I think there was some other math functions I also used. That was quite nice that they were already there. Let's see if I can find that. I think I only used. I might have had another edition at some point where I used another thing than math ceiling, but yeah, and I also had to do some more parsing of numbers to strings and strings to numbers, which sometimes it was nice having this num from string method that helped quite a lot, but I think I had another issues with number parsing that I reported a bug on. Yeah, it was something related to commas, I think, where comma numbers that didn't get passed in num from strings. But yeah,
the reason you need the reason you need ceiling is because it's not an integral division.
Yeah, I think that was why I did that. Just be sure. Yeah, and we also had some other math operators happening in here, which was quite nice. That's was already in the language. Things you would expect often to be in languages, but you never know when languages are quite new.
Especially when there is when regex match is not behaving as regex match.
Yeah, and when you have also when like some languages doesn't necessarily have support for syntax like this directly, where it would sometimes require you to use the math library instead to do it. But I don't even know if it's also in the math library. I haven't checked. Didn't have to. Let's see, is there other things? Yeah, I can also see some of these starting to get longer and longer, around 107 lines on this one, which is, of course, one of the things with Advent of Code. They become tougher and tougher throughout the days. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to this specific day here. Let's go to day 5. I think this one was the one that was the toughest, or that took the longest here. It was also 300 lines long at the end. I can see I was hoping I could fold the class together, but I haven't added support for that myself. That's on me. Yeah, so here I actually had to use multiple classes to make a nice solution for this one. I'm not going to go into the actual problem because I think understanding this problem was a 10-15 minutes task in itself. Let's see if there's anything worth noting this one. So to quickly scan over it. Yeah, here I actually hit one funny thing is I wanted to do a multi-line string. So I had this parsing method where I had this one long line here that I essentially, because I couldn't do multi-line strings in here correctly, but built in some ways, like you see in other languages using triple signs here or something like that. I had to put it into one line and then just do new line characters inside of it. And that was a bit annoying to that point that I considered just creating a separate file and importing that in instead. Yeah.
For some reason, I thought, okay, yeah, I had a recollection that our regular strings are multi-line strings, but I don't think I was right.
Yeah, that was. I also thought that at the start and thought it was just my my plugin.
Because the compiler is not even like the error for multi-line strings is like weird. Is like an invalid or unexpected token. So it's like broken in multiple ways.
Yeah, if we look at it, yeah, it's not really that clear what is happening. No, this didn't actually even error right now.
Yeah, that's okay. Cool.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a bug on it. I can that I also found. I can see somebody.
Here, Mark linked. Chris
linked the bug for multi-line not working. So yeah, it's a reported issue that somebody else also experienced. So there's not really much reason to report that myself. But yeah, it's at least one of those things that you realize that there's no way of doing this. But it's very different from language to language with how do you want to deal with indents and so on doing it. For example, some languages just have a separate sign for dealing with that, and I think Kotlin, for example, you just chain a method on it for trimming indents afterwards. It's very different from language to language what they do. Some just don't care at all. Yeah, and again, we see here that I kept using this JSON stringify. This was probably the one that annoyed me the most. That it wasn't that obvious to me that the parsing of it would just work. That I could just have done a simple parse of it instead of JSON stringify it to make it into a string. So this method here is returning an integer or number, and I want it to be a string for comparing it with the other thing. How I wanted to do it. So I made this mistake of wrapping everything in JSON stringify, which was not the smartest move in these situations. I even considered adding afterwards, when I realized this, I considered submitting a feature request for the language server to actually suggest to have a quick fix available for it when you do stringify on a number, that you can just go in and have a quick fix action on it to convert it to a string with a string directly instead.
You felt it's easier to actually get it implemented in the language server, so it has auto fixes instead of like fixing your code.
Oh yes,
I love it.
That's,
but can you repeat, like, what was the rationale? Like, why did you feel like you needed it? Like, is it still required, or is it like a bug? Or
I think it's there's no bugs really. It's more just when you get into language first time and you have something that needs to take a string and you have an integer, that you're kind of expecting. It's often you're either expecting the language to cast it automatically, or that you can cast it doing some kind of casting in front of it, saying string like this, that some other languages have. So I was kind of lost and how should I do this? And I didn't think of just wrapping it in a string with a parameter syntax inside of it.
Specifically, I recall that equal just accepts any, right, Sebastian?
Yeah, it should accept any.
It should accept any, yes. So I was also wondering, maybe like the formats are different. So maybe one returns like a number, but it should be just accept anything.
Yeah.
But it's doing like a deep strict equal or something. So it will only, well, it's like a bit flawed.
I could test if there's. Oh, I actually even did something now that.
This was like an issue I was running into with the expect equal method, because I think I mean, like compared to if you use like the assert, like if you say like asserts x equals y, like it will check for you that the types are the same. So if you try comparing a string to a number, like you get that at compile time or like in your IDE. Whereas here you're only going to get the error once you run wing test, which is like much later.
Much later.
Yeah, and I can also see if I remove the stringify these, it will fail because these are two number objects, and deep strict equal on that, then they're not the same object.
Yeah, that's what I meant, right? So
exactly.
I think like this deep strict equal is like probably not the best decision. Like for like the any part or like the unknown part, to be more precise, I think that's sort of what you want for like the testing.
Yeah.
Even though it's like a bit later stage, but the deep strict equal is pretty annoying. So I ran into this like several times as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think actually even I wrote about this a long time ago. This was one of the things I wrote down in my notes that I experienced that about this deep strict equal problem. Yeah, I guess that's kind of that's what I have here. So I did have a lot of findings from all of this that I can just quickly open up because now I actually had Slack open here. So I kind of wrote a day-by-day log from all of these things. Let's go to I think it was first in day 2 where I started to write down some things that day 3 I found the expect API instead. I found some weird stuff like copy mute is not an in-flight and so on. And day 4 that was one of the things I remember now. In day 4 in my code, I use a substring, and that took me a while to. It was at least. It's also one of those things that differs from language to language. That substring is it based on indexes or length? and there's a pretty big difference between those things. That the second argument is not a length, but it's the second index you want. So if you're doing a substring, let's say you wanted, if you have any string and you do a substring, then yeah, the index is there. It actually matters if it's length or the second index.
Yeah, I think it's actually the wrong decision on our part. Like, I don't think that that's the intuitive. Like, to me, that's also not like most languages that I use use the length as the length of the slice, not
and if you want to move
two
backwards,
indexes.
then you would just use the negative length if you wanted to move backwards. I think there was also another thing here this day that I realized when using classes. I think I had at the start I had a method in here that I named the same as one of my properties, which first gave an error in or the error message was at least very weird. We can try to, I guess, reproduce that error message to see. Day 4, and let's just do a numbers method here. I really should improve my. Let's say it also returns a num here. My ID is not happy with what I'm doing, but yeah. So the error message we are getting from that. Oh yeah, it's panic backtrace. It's not captured. It's crashing on it, and if we look at the console, let me just get that up. It's at least showing a. Yeah, okay. Here it's actually showing us numbers already defined in the scope. But yeah, it's here it's kind of clear, but what's happening. But still, yeah, it's at least one of those things that's always, can you define things that are named the same or not when it's a property and function? Yeah.
But it's also there's a panic there, right?
Yeah, there's a panic down here that happened at the same time. Which, let's see. Yeah, it at least shows a panic also happening, which we see in the second error here.
Yeah.
And that's obviously the first error here is fine, but the second probably shouldn't happen. Yeah. Yep. I think that's all I have to show for this. It was really interesting trying to do all of this in Wing. And of course, I think I could talk much more about all of the weird things I realized. Like when looking at my comments here, I also wrote down generators that I realized that it didn't have a yield method. I did create issues on some of these things, but yeah. But yeah, this is definitely one of the big advantages I see with doing Advent of Code on languages like Wing. We really realize some of the points where we are stuck a little, and where we can really get forward, or where things are a little more complicated compared to other languages. And what features we can then add in to actually fix these things, because that's the advantage. We can all help contribute to actually don't have these problems.
Amazing. Very brave of you, dude.
Yeah, it's we also had one other person joining this challenge that actually got a little further than me when looking at the small leaderboard we created. Can't remember what day he went. I think he got to day 7 or 8, but then he stopped. But yeah, it's very fun.
Impressive.
Very impressive. Wow. Anyone has any question to Oliver? All right, Oliver, thank you so much for sharing and for using Wing. It's really interesting to see the journey.
You can see Nathan raised.
Yes.
amazing. This is awesome. Oliver, would it be possible to get your notes, because they're
on
more
the Slack, I
extensive.
think. No,
The actually all the notes I had were the ones on Slack. Actually, the post I did day there.
Okay,
so
cool.
Those are the notes I had. I just forgot to kind of put them up before going into this meeting, which would have probably helped a little bit.
Awesome.